Good to see everyone. Let's give everybody a minute. All right, let's get rolling. So actually what I thought we would do today is I was going to actually open it up for a little Ask Me Anything round because I know there's lots of questions. We talk about a lot of stuff on these calls, and there's a lot of questions about terms or how things kind of hang together and I just don't know how much people sort of pick up and how much they kind of write off as like, oh, it's just, what the people in the Eros world are saying. So I thought, why not open it up to do a little question and answer kind of from the jump, just on sort of anything in the erotic canon, so to speak. So wanted to open it up for that. And then if there's any, in the meantime, I will think of something else if there's no questions. I will think of some topic to talk about. So would love to know if there's anything out there from the people that I could help shine a little light on. I'll give that a minute and then you can just unmute and start talking um, if you want. In the meantime, I will consider what would be.
So Eli, since you go to the way back, the they've talked about, in OM meditation, uh, we do this clitoris stimulation, but and I understand that in the past, back in One Taste or maybe even before that, they tried to come up with a way to stimulate males in the same type of meditation. I'm just wondering maybe if you could because I wasn't around at that time, and maybe some of the others weren't either. What, because it does seem to present a problem. Males don't seem to have, well, I mean, it's a known fact, right? The males orgasm much less than females. So a female can move into orgasm and kind of reside there for a longer time than a male can. So I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit about what happened.
Yeah,
What the,
I mean, absolutely. I think, if you kind of think about this from, it's a great question. And if you think about it from the perspective of like, okay, what are we trying to do with OM, right? Let's instead of because it can very easily get into like a, well, it's like it's lopsided, or it's not fair, or and not that you're saying these things, but or like, what about the men, or something like that. And I think the first question you have to ask is, what is the aim? What are we actually trying to do? And I think for a lot of, I think there's a couple ways of answering that question, but I'll start with a couple off the top of my head. I think we are trying to enter an erotic state. We are trying to enter we're trying to enter a mystical state. And if men could do that on their own, we would be just staying home all day and doing that in this way. Does that make sense? Like if a dude could bring himself to that state without a woman in the same state that he could with a woman, we just wouldn't need women. Like it would not, it's like sort of, the question's answered by the reality, right? Which is that there's something that we get from women that or from a woman in a relaxed, open state that we cannot produce ourselves. And you can notice this in all of the ways that we try to manufacture it. So we try to consume that state through billions of dollars consumed in pornography every year. We try to consume that state in strip clubs, right? You're not even touching a woman, and you're within a few feet of what is ostensibly a turned on woman, and your body just feels good. You feel turned on. There's an influx of energy which biologically we know is possible to happen there. So we go and you spend the money, and she puts her attention on you, and you feel good, right? Sex workers, what, like 9 out of 10 sex workers in the world are women, right? So you kind of look at this and you're like, wow, it seems that women are very good at getting energy into other people's bodies, very good at it. But they're not very good at getting energy into their own bodies, right? So there's something going on there. And so then what's the state? Well, the state is to be able to, or sorry, what's the goal? There's a lot of goals depending on what level of abstraction, you want to touch this thing at. Um, One goal is, I think, is to enter a mystical healing state, which promotes human flourishing. And that's what science is demonstrating that OM does when done as prescribed. The issue starts to become, and so then, and then the sort of the promise of the practice on some level is that, well, you learn to do it in OM and then you can learn to do it anywhere, right? Like what's true in OM is true in life. And so there's this whole program we have on the Eros platform called the Erotic Artist, program and course. It's a whole track, right? Which is sort of this notion that you can learn how to cultivate the erotic state in OM and also then do it in life. So I think you're probably with me so far, right? So then why is that so interesting? Right? Why is that so interesting to us? Well, because we tend to not live in that state most of the time. Well, why aren't we, you can sort of trace that backwards. Why aren't we living in that state? Well, because our culture and society and everything is set up in such a way that um, women are locked down and men have no idea how to feel, right? Men are unfeeling, insensitive, and you know, self-absorbed on their own genitals and and women are sort of like, outwardly absorbed and you know, have very little idea how their bodies work and they're locked down and their nervous systems are brittle. Basically, like that's our culture. And and so then there's a way that you can, if you just continue the same grooves that will happen if genital contact is introduced to those particular preconditioned psyches, what you'll get is a pattern of behavior that will simply perpetuate the status quo. And ideally, you should be able to ohm, it should, but like, the idea might be, okay, you learn how to ohm, and then you can take that the same sensitivity and attention and artistic connection to beauty, and you can apply that to gardening. You can apply that to cooking. You can apply that to writing a letter to a prison pen pal, right? You can do a million things that bring that level of artistry and imbue everything you're doing with that kind of art. But those things will be progressively more difficult the more conditioning is laden on top of them. Because our conditioning is not to do things that way. Our conditioning is to do things in kind of a climax service. There's a whole set of consciousness ideas which get in the way of doing something for the love of doing it, right? The Western psyche is built around burden and sacrifice and deep duality. I do in order to get. And what I'm doing, it is not for me, it is for the other. Or um, think about what you're going to get in the future. It's so much better than what's happening right now, right? There's all of these ideas that are laced into the Western, I'm not saying it's a good or a bad thing. It's just what it is. And so if you were to take a brand new person who's never owned before, man and woman, put them together and say, okay, you're going to do this with the finger stroking the clitoris first. They're both going to be like, woman's going to be like, well, oh, geez, oh, God, take my pants off. Oh, no, I don't know if I could, and then receive for 15 minutes and do that every day for 100 days. Oh, gosh. And the guy's gonna be like, man, this is kind of whack. I'm not getting my dick stroked, and I'm just kind of a finger here doing the service providing, and oh, I don't know if this is really good. This isn't doing anything. I'm just getting her off, and blah blah blah, and right. Do it the other way. Everyone's gonna know exactly what they're doing. Dude takes his pants off, woman strokes, everyone's comfortable. Right? The first way, there's actually a shot at some intimacy. There's actually a shot at being so brought down into your body that you actually might have to encounter something. And taking something which is so deeply grooved, like a woman's hands on a man's genitals, under any context. You can dress it up. You can put lipstick on a pig. Isn't that the phrase? Right? And it's not to say that shouldn't happen. There's a place for sexual experiences. But as a man, what I've started to notice is, oh my God, my sexual experiences are so easily grooved. They're so grooved. And so they fall into those grooves so easily, where all I really, in some part of my mind, it's like, yeah, having an absent woman, a mentally absent woman to have sex with isn't the worst thing in the world. Like, that actually sounds fine. I could use a place to put some of my aggression, and there's a whole series of man ideas that go totally under the radar, which are part of the sexual consciousness pantheon. That I didn't make that up. That's something I inherited, you know. And so I think a lot of what we're doing here is like they say you have to bend the paper back. If it's bent this way, you got to bend it all the way the other direction. And even there, even after 16 years of practice, like it's so easy because it's so reinforced by every other mental paradigm. Om is still a trip, Stroking a woman's clitoris is still a trip. There's still a bazillion things that can happen in an Om that are, and even just on a hardware level, the clitoris it's going to do so many more things in 8,000 or more nerve endings in the head of an eraser than, yeah. So anyway, um, yeah, and I guess just to sort of wrap that up, the thing that would have to be true. Oh, so answer sort of the historical question. Uh, yeah, they tried it, and it was a very condition laden experience. There was zero doubt that that's what was going on. No one had the consciousness to do it well. Under I'll say no one, but it took a very high level of practice, very high level of practice. Um, you know.
Yeah, you were just bending the paper in the same direction all the time.
Yeah, that was the very tail end right before I like really got involved, you know. But but I've had my, obviously I know OMing pretty well at this point. And so that's yeah. That's sort of the starter. I could go on for hours, but that's sort of the basic.
I want to make, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
intimacy that you don't get, and within the within the Buddhist practice, that's part of your meditations and things are to reach a state of intimacy, but you're doing it with just, you're opening yourself up. You're not doing it in connection with a
Yeah,
lot of other people,
right.
That is
In
one,
the same way.
right. And
Yeah.
that is the one big difference I experience with Om is that opening is with someone else. You're kind of both there at the same time, and it's
Well, that's presumably you are, right? And that's sort of the rub is that what you start to notice, I think, as a guy is that, oh wow, I can tell when the woman's absent. I can tell when her mind is checked out, right? Or you begin to start to notice that your thoughts are really not only originating in your own mind as a stroker. That there are many thoughts that I sit there and own with, and I'm like, that is not my originating thought that I just had. One of my teachers used to do this thing where he'd be stroking a woman. And this actually may have been in retrospect, I'm like, was he flirting through doing this? I don't know. But, he would tell us, he said, if I'm stroking in an ohm and my genitals become aroused, I will tell the woman kind of playfully, hey, cut that out, right? Because there's a way that they will dump the sensation that's going into their body back into our bodies. They can do that. They are able to limbically do that. And to a normal man's psyche, it's like someone handing you $100. Why? Why wouldn't I take that? Well, there's a lot of reasons you might not want to take it. One of the chiefly is you know, you care about the person, themselves eating something. But
I
I'm
think
so
it,
used to having $100.
yeah, I think it's you're pointing out what's the goal. You have to think
Yeah.
about what the goal is and keep coming back to that. It's not arousal necessarily physical arousal isn't the goal kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, right. It's a means.
Right.
That's right. Arousal, that's extremely shrewd observation. Arousal itself is not the goal. Arousal in service of liberation is the goal. Because you can use arousal, in a variety of ways. But yes, in you're spot on, Jack. That's really good pull. Because you can use arousal recreationally. A lot of drug use and or psychedelic use is recreational. And you can also there's many ways to use it. Yeah. Really good point. That's that was a first of its kind to go in that exact and to do that kind of dissection for me. I'm gonna remember that. That was really helpful for me too. Thank you. We're doing an Ask Me Anything about Eros, whatever. Jack was gracious enough to get us started. Any other questions? We could probably use that as a clip. Sorry. Inside voice with whatever.
They had one of Nicole's talks, and I don't remember who the person she was talking with. They were talking about ancient Greece and how that it used to be a practice where, uh, you know, essentially it was an Om thing. Multiple people would show up. I haven't researched that, but maybe I don't know how much you know about that. That it used to be like a thing. Everybody would show up and they would do an Om, and everybody would feel the
Well,
con.
there was some, I mean, there's some, they were, back in ancient Greece, I don't know if they had OMing, but there was a certainly sexual rights. There's a book by Merlin Stone that Nicole loves called When God Was a Woman. And that book talks about sexual rights, and it talks about basically it's like, anything that you consider to be a cult at one time was really all there was. And that, there's the Venusian, you know, sort of uh, cultic establishment, uh, you know, um, well, Venus has many different what are called epithets. So there's Venus the warrior, Venus the prostitute, Venus the blah blah blah. There's all these different faces of Venus, and they all had different followers, different customs, different temples, and they all did different things. And there's a fertility goddess, for the farming, there's all these different faces of Venus, and and so there would be rights, there would be these, as I recall, there's that book and there's another one that's slipping my mind right now. But yeah, basically where the women who would go, I don't know if it was all of the women in the town would have to do this, but I think there actually was, you could probably Google this one, that there's uh around the Temple of Venus, the women in the town had to basically like take not like a shift, but like do a residency where they would say yes to anybody who would come in. Like that's actually, I'm pretty sure that's documented and I've read that. because she asks for those references often, and I'm usually one of the people who gets them. Um, so yeah, pretty sure that's the truth. I have a friend who used to say, "Ah, to live in more barbarous times." I don't know. Oh, to live in more erotic, less legislated time. I don't know. Was it better for everyone? Maybe. A lot of different criteria on that one. Anyone else? Or Jack, you want to triple or nothing? Oh, Kelly's coming on video. Hi, Kelly.
I do have a question.
Shoot.
Well, hello, because it's been like a real long minute since I've seen
It has
you.
been a minute. Good to see you.
You too. I'm wondering if you can speak to um, how men mirror women. This was something that has kind of been a disconnect for me. And I've been doing like some trial and error with it. And I could see, I could definitely see like the effect of my mood and my vibe, really altering my husband. Um, and so I'm kind of wondering, like, anything that you want to say about it, but also like from a man's perspective, what does it feel like on that end?
Well, the first thing is there's a long road for a man to admit how affected by women he actually is. That is an admission that does not come easily, because it is way more than we would like to believe. Um, and so how much? A lot, a lot, a lot, a lot. Um, you know, um, OM is a great sort of starting place. Is that you know, um, I used to do this. I used to make this joke in class, sort of. I can't remember what context exactly it would be in, but oh, where women would basically be like, I just want to own with someone who's been doing this for 20 years, and I would say, okay, well, in that case, own with Russell. No, I'm kidding. But, the women would be like, I want to own, with someone who's really been, I don't want to own with no newbie, you know. And so I would make up a lie. This is a lie I would tell. Okay. But it was a lie with a purpose, which is that I would tell them that, and the truth is I've seen this before, but I kind of morphed the story. So I believe, because I've seen things like this, that I could take any new stroker in front of a room full of like a women's course, right? Room full of women, and say, I have been training this guy. If they all believe that I have some kind of authority or whatever, I could say, I've been training this dude for like 5 years to be like the greatest Jedi stroker who has ever lived. And he's, in my estimation, a finer stroker than even I. And he has three slots for ohms this afternoon. If anybody wants to ohm with him, let him know. And he can, you set it up with him. This could be a guy who has like a week in the practice, right? Just the very most basics, barely basics, right? Those women will have like rock your socks off ohms with that dude. Because there just needs to be, because ultimately, but the point of that is they will make it not because he's a bad stroker, because their belief in him will make him such a good stroker. Not that he's a bad stroker. He's going to show up and they're going to be like, well, this is great. And it's really going to be, it's going to be crap. No, other way around. They're going to be like, this dude is incredible. He is incredible. He is. And he will become a genius. In the same way that if I'm stroking a woman for a demo and she's like, I hate this guy, I'm gonna feel like a schmuck. When I do a demo in front of a class, it's her, she's driving that. If she doesn't get off in the demo, if she doesn't open up and have an enjoyable experience, I'm like I'm made or broken by that reception. So that's a powerful starting point, you know. At the same time, right? It's not just saying, well, you just have to go in and be, unconditionally approving of all behavior. It's like that's not also the communication. But you just also do have to know you have a crazy large effect.
Thank you. That example really hit.
Yeah, good. Anything else?
Well, along that line, then it's really the expectations going in, because I know that like in you want to go in and open yourself on both sides, right? You don't want to have all these anxious thoughts, or you're trying to be just kind of open and going with the flow,
Right.
which is of course very hard. It's
It's
hard.
it's see, this is the thing. It's expectations is part of it, but I think the deeper, like Nicole is a great example of this, right? She's such a great example. Nicole is determined to get off. You could, and you see this all the time on her talks and things, and everyone who talks to her feels like a genius. You talk to that woman and you're like, wow, she made me feel so smart. And you're looking at her and you're like, this woman is like a giant in every intellectual capacity and like, insight and everything. Like there's layers. The layers that woman pulls off in a talk, like I'm shocked. I'm still here because of that. Like that's, because of who she is and what she does. And and at the same time, she makes you feel like that when you talk to her. At least for the first couple of years, and then she starts to say, "Okay, here's a couple of things you could switch up." Um, but that's it's 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 a determination. When she talks about unconditional freedom, that's what she's talking about. Is there is no condition that will dictate my response. Zero. The person could be stroking my knee, and they will feel great. And from there, we will go from great to greater. This is great. Can you move a little to the left? Ah, greater, even greater. You know, it never feels like, I mean, you have to deliberately throw it. That she doesn't like. But you show up and you play, she's playing.
Yeah, I love it's like a combination of like what Jack was saying, the expectation but also the determination.
She's just made up her mind. See, but the expectation is of herself. It is that's what it is that's what she in the sutras, and that's what she would refer to as noblesse oblige. It is beneath her to come to an experience and not get off like that. It is unbecoming. She believes it is her calling as a woman to be that. And anything less is her letting herself down. It's not, you see, there's a difference between that and having an expectation that's anything close to external. Noblesse oblige. That's a great distinction. Oh, Russell, go ahead.
Um, I'm trying to frame it in terms of not abstract. Sorry. Um, let's do this. One of the things that was a big turn for me um, it's a combination of two things that any adjustment was a way of making it better, so that there was a something where I came with my own ego intact and it wasn't frail and it wasn't needed to be supported. Um, and then with that attention, I could I could give agency or sovereignty to anyone that I was in connection with. And um, and the surprise, although I did wish it was there, but it was like I, I didn't have much um, proof, I suppose, in my growing up that when someone has agency, when they have sovereignty, when I interact with them, it is much more substantial or fulfilling or um, I feel much more met. I'm much able to meet the other person if there's like if I'm pushing against something and it's not there, it's just like it just feels like I'm walking off a cliff or something. But if there's somebody there, it feels like I'm not the only one, and that's I think a lot of people miss that.
Yeah, nice.
I have a mechanical question. It's like, why the left
I'll
hand and
do my
not the
best.
right? Why the left hand and not the right?
So the left hand has a certain degree of access to the upper left-hand quadrant in an easy way. If you put your finger down, it just sneaks right in there. Versus the right hand, which would require kind of a more awkward turn of the hand. That's one, because you're trying to aim for the upper left-hand quadrant of the clitoris. That's sort of the 1 o'clock spot area to get up inside that little pocket. And then and so that's the really the primary reason. And then also, they say, I mean, uh, for most people are I think an extra payoff, not the reason, but a nice party favor of that is that the majority of people are right-handed. And so you've got a certain level of dominance and control with the right hand, which tends to be the doing faculty, the doing, taking, manipulating faculty. And we actually kind of want to break that. We don't want to use the hand as a doing mechanism. We want to use the hand as a reception, as almost an erogenous organ. We want to use it as a co-receiving faculty. And so the left for a lot of people, not that everybody, but one of the nice benefits is that kind of gives you a little bit of a head start because you're not necessarily de-learning a dominant hand mental routine. This is, the left hand side is sort of right brain. So it's like, you got a little bit more of the artistic, you know.
From a chi standpoint, right? They say your energy moves out the right and pulls in the left. The chi moves out your right arm and in your left arm, kind of thing. I thought maybe
Yeah.
it had something to do with that kind of. And I guess
No, I don't think, I mean, I don't know. That one I haven't heard before, but in the sort of more advanced, levels of OMing, we do talk about, the circuit between, the right thumb and the left index fingers. That could certainly, I could see an analog appearing there.
Because you like in meditation, you want to keep your back straight. You want to put
Right.
your tongue, the tip of your tongue on the palate behind the front teeth. You're doing all these things for energetic reasons. They don't go into deep details about it, but it's really about the flow of chi and stuff through your channels and stuff like that. I thought perhaps it was kind of playing on that kind of thing too, is
Yeah.
you're receiving through the left, like you're saying, is going up to the right side of it's being controlled by the right side of the brain too.
I think science will keep telling us more and more about this, This will be interesting to see and hear. Cool. Well, maybe we peak it there. That was a nice conversation. Thank you guys. That was a nice little snack, little midday snack. We will see you soon, and we're gonna have some fun changes coming to these talks soon. Switching things up a little bit, so stay tuned for that. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.